It started as just another tense exchange in the ongoing partisan clashes on cable television. Kash Patel, a former Trump administration official and one of the most visible defenders of Modi-leaned politics. During the segment, he made a series of statements about Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett that caught immediate attention, not because they were part of any known investigation, presenting any documents or evidence on air. Rooted through shadow organizations, the accusations were grave and delivered with absolute confidence. To those unfamiliar with Patel's tactics, they may have sounded like breaking news. To Crockett's team, they sounded like legal dynamite. Asterisk within 48 hours of the broadcast, Crockett's legal team filed a formal complaint in federal court. The lawsuit named Patel directly and sought $80 million in damages for defamation. The filing itself was lengthy, filled with citations, context, and legal precedent across online platforms for months, and how Patel's television appearance escalated the damage to her public and professional reputation. The complaint stated that Patel's claims were wholly fabricated, and that he had acted with actual malice, the legal threshold required for a public figure to win a defamation case. Asterisk, this wasn't a case of political mudslinging that disappears in the news cycle. Crockett's team attached exhibits that included transcripts of Patel's remarks, social media posts amplifying the false claims, and data from analytics firms showing a surge in targeted harassment online. Following his televised remarks, they argued that Patel had used his platform not only to discredit her, but to intentionally stir public distrust toward her work in Congress. Asterisk for Jasmine Crockett. This wasn't just about defending her name, it was about confronting a broader culture of misinformation that she believes has gone unchecked for too long. In a written statement, she said, "When lies are broadcast as fact and repeated until they feel real, people get hurt. Democracy gets hurt. I won't be silent while someone tries to destroy my name for political sport." Asterisk legal analysts immediately began to assess the weight of the suit. While defamation suits involving public figures are notoriously difficult to win due to the high burden of proving malicious intent, saw this as a rare case where the evidence might actually meet that standard. One media law professor noted that Patel's certainty during the interview, combined with the lack of evidence he presented, could support Crockett's argument that he acted with reckless disregard for the truth. Asterisk Patel, for his part, did not apologize or retract any of his claims. Instead, he doubled down in interviews and podcasts, suggesting that the lawsuit was an attempt to silence him. "She doesn't want the truth out," he told one conservative outlet. "This is what the left does when you hit a nerve, they sue." Yet legal experts noted that if Patel had real evidence to support his claims, he hadn't produced it yet, and without it, the risk of financial and reputational fallout was real. Asterisk what makes the lawsuit particularly significant is that it steps into the uncomfortable intersection between politics, free speech, and media influence. In an age where talking points become viral content in minutes, and reputations can be shattered by one clip, Crockett's legal move is being watched closely by both sides of the aisle. Some commentators view it as a potential blueprint for how lawmakers may push back on weaponized media attacks in the future. Asterisk Jasmine, few willing to take it all the way to court. The $80 million figure raised eyebrows not only for its size, but for what it symbolized. It wasn't just about damages, it was about drawing a line. Her message was clear. If you use lies to destroy someone's career, there will be consequences. The moment Kash Patel made the accusations on live television, it set off a chain reaction that neither side could walk away from immediately. Seated confidently in a studio chair, he leaned into the camera and accused Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of being involved in what he described as a covert funneling scheme involving dark money and possible foreign sources. His language was deliberate and measured, giving the impression that he was speaking from authority or inside knowledge. To viewers, it sounded less like a theory and more like a revelation. Asterisk Patel didn't hedge his words. He claimed that Crockett had knowingly accepted campaign contributions that were routed through intermediary nonprofits and PACs, with links to international advocacy groups with foreign interests. He implied that her rise in political influence was not as grassroots as it seemed. The host pushed back briefly, asking for clarification. But Patel insisted that there was more to come, and suggested he had documents that would validate The claims when the time was right, asterisk within minutes of the segment airing, political Twitter erupted. Right-wing influencers clipped the segment and began circulating it as proof of corruption within the Democratic Party. On the other side, supporters of Crockett accused Patel of slandering a sitting member of Congress for political gain. But the damage was already being done. Her name began trending, not for any policy or vote, but because of an explosive claim that had no public evidence to back it up. Asterisk, what made the situation even more inflammatory was the specificity of Patel's language mentioned exact months, financial quarters, and organizations by acronym details that created a false sense of legitimacy. For average viewers unfamiliar with campaign finance structures, it sounded like an expose. For Crockett was a devastating mix of misinformation and character assassination. Asterisk, her communications team scrambled to issue a rebuttal, making it clear that all of her campaign donations were fully reported, vetted, and disclosed through the FEC with no red flags or questionable affiliations. But, as with most viral moments in the political media age, the correction never spread as fast as the claim. Screenshots of Patel's quotes began surfacing on Instagram and TikTok, often stripped of context, giving the illusion that a scandal had already been proven. Asterisk, legal experts watching the segment saw a different story. Patel had not shown a single piece of documentation during the broadcast, nor had he referenced any public investigations or whistleblower reports. Everything he said appeared to stem from private assertion, not public record. This, they argued, was where the legal exposure lay. When public figures use their media access to make claims that are not only unverified, but directly damaging to the reputation of others, especially elected officials, it crosses into potentially actionable territory. Asterisk, what stood out to observers was that Patel had made these remarks, knowing that Crockett was a high-profile and vocal member of the House. She had gained national attention for her bold, pointed exchanges in committee hearings and had emerged as a recognizable face in the Democratic Party's younger leadership class. To some, the attack seemed calculated, targeting someone who had become a symbol of resistance to the hard-right agenda. Asterisk, in interviews following the broadcast, Patel refused to walk anything back. He suggested that Crockett's legal action was a panic move designed to intimidate him before he could release what he had. But to date, no such evidence had been produced. Meanwhile, Crockett's legal team began documenting how his comments were being cited in conspiracy posts, fundraising campaigns, and even constituent emails accusing her of treason. Asterisk, the core of the accusation, foreign-linked donations to her campaign, was not only untrue, it struck at the heart of electoral integrity. Alleging that an elected official is beholden to foreign interests is one of the most damaging charges one can make in American politics. For Patel to make such a claim without producing proof placed him in an extremely vulnerable legal position, especially if he was found to have knowingly lied or fabricated the details. Asterisk, in the court filings, Crockett's attorneys emphasized that Patel's remarks were not accidental. They argued he deliberately used the language of investigative authority to confuse viewers and create the illusion of wrongdoing. And they pointed out how Patel's platform had grown in recent years, on podcasts, social media, and news appearances. His voice, influential in shaping public opinion, that influence, they argued, came with responsibility. And when that responsibility was abused to smear someone's reputation without merit, it became grounds for serious legal consequences. In the days that followed the lawsuit, all eyes turned to Kash Patel's response. Most assumed he would either downplay the suit or attack Jasmine Crockett's motives as political theater. Instead, during a scheduled appearance on a right news network, Patel stunned the audience with a performance that went in a completely unexpected direction. Asterisk, he was calm, composed, and oddly energized. When the host brought up the lawsuit, reading aloud a portion of Crockett's claim about defamation and intentional harm, Patel simply smiled. He didn't fidget, didn't interrupt, and didn't dodge. "I've been waiting for this," he said, looking straight into the camera. That moment alone caught the attention of not just the studio crew, but viewers across the political spectrum who sensed something more was about to unfold. Asterisk, then came the prop that no one anticipated. Patel pulled a thick binder from under the desk and placed it on the table with a solid thud. He tapped its cover a few times and said, "This is what discovery's going to look like. I've got files, I've got correspondence, I've got names." The host, taken aback, asked whether that meant he had real evidence to defend against the defamation charge. Patel didn't say yes or no. Instead, he leaned into ambiguity, replying, "Let's just say I'm comfortable with what's coming next." Asterisk, the exchange quickly went viral. Clips of Patel holding the binder circulated on social media, spurring conspiracy theories, speculation, and debate. Some claimed it was a bluff meant to intimidate Crockett's team and shape public perception. Before court proceedings even began, others insisted he had legitimate documents and that the public would soon see a twist in the story. Asterisk. Legal analysts began dissecting the moment. While it's not unusual for public figures to project confidence when facing lawsuits, Patel's theatrics were bold, especially given the seriousness of the allegations against him. To suggest he was prepared not just to defend himself, but to mount a counter-offensive. Yet, according to multiple reporters, Patel did not submit any formal response to the court that included the alleged evidence he showcased on air. Asterisk Crockett's legal team responded swiftly, calling the binder stunt a media gimmick designed to mislead the public. In their statement, they emphasized that if Patel truly possessed exonerating or expository material, he had every legal right and obligation to present it through proper channels, not televised theater. They also reminded the public that, so far, no law enforcement agency, campaign finance regulator, or oversight body had ever flagged Congresswoman Crockett for misconduct of any kind. Asterisk, behind the scenes, Patel's maneuver raised strategic questions. Was he genuinely holding documents he intended to use in court, or was he trying to flip the narrative in the court of public opinion, where perception often matters more than fact? Some insiders suggested Patel's real goal was to provoke a discovery process that could allow him access to Crockett's communications and campaign data, essentially turning the tables on the plaintiff. Asterisk, in the meantime, the story took on a life of its own. Conservative influencers praised Patel for standing his ground, while Crockett's supporters criticized the move as a dangerous form of political gaslighting. Both camps began framing the legal battle as a broader fight over truth, misinformation, and the boundaries of political speech. Asterisk, what remained clear was that Patel's television response had shifted the tone of the entire case. No longer was this simply a lawsuit over false accusations, had become a performance-driven media spectacle. With implications beyond the courtroom, Crockett stayed firm in her approach, avoiding back-and-forth spats on social media and instead doubling down on the legal process. Her team filed additional documents, reinforcing that Patel's public comments were not supported by factual record and were made, they argued, with a deliberate intent to smear and provoke. Asterisk, whether Patel's binder was filled with real documents or empty gestures remained to be seen. But what couldn't be denied was the reaction it provoked. Viewers were talking, partisans were picking sides, and the legal pressure on both parties had grown exponentially. For now, Patel had managed to momentarily shift the narrative, but the courtroom, unlike the studio, wouldn't be moved by optics alone. As the lawsuit between Jasmine Crockett and Kash Patel moved from headlines into serious legal territory, a quieter but more impactful conversation began to emerge, one about the broader implications of the case. While on the surface, it appeared to be a dispute between two prominent political figures. Legal experts, media analysts, and even some lawmakers began to acknowledge what was at stake. How misinformation is handled in the realm of political speech and media influence. Asterisk, the heart of Crockett's complaint wasn't just that Patel had defamed her, but that he had used his media presence to amplify deliberate falsehoods in a way that had tangible consequences both for her personally and for the broader trust in democratic processes. In making that case, she wasn't just calling out one man, she was confronting a system where platforms reward provocation and inflammatory claims more than accuracy or accountability. Asterisk, Patel, a frequent commentator on conservative outlets and a close ally to Trump-era officials, had become a familiar voice in that ecosystem. His influence wasn't just tied to his past government service, but to the way he leveraged media, television, podcasts, social channels to shape narratives. By making serious accusations about a sitting member of Congress without offering public proof, he had stepped into dangerous territory, and Crockett's lawsuit was drawing a hard boundary. Asterisk, from the perspective of Crockett's legal team, the case could serve as a landmark. If successful, it might set a precedent for how courts treat false political speech that's broadcast with the intent to mislead. Unlike the wild accusations that often float around online with little consequence, this was now a formal matter in federal court, and the judge would eventually have to determine whether Patel's words crossed the line from protected opinion to actionable defamation. Asterisk, meanwhile, observers in legal and political circles pointed to a growing trend. Elected officials, especially women and people of color, have increasingly found themselves targets of manufactured narratives designed to undermine their credibility. What Crockett's team argued was that Patel, knowing the influence of his words, had crafted a narrative meant to weaponize suspicion and damage her integrity. And if allowed to go unchallenged, it would send a message that public smears were simply part of doing business in politics. Asterisk, Patel, on the other hand, maintained that his right to speak freely was being challenged. He framed the lawsuit as an attack on his First Amendment rights, insisting that political speeches, especially when it concerns elected officials, must remain protected. But constitutional scholars quickly pointed out that free speech does not include knowingly making false and damaging statements. The question wasn't whether Patel had the right to speak, it was whether his speech had caused harm through deliberate dishonesty. Asterisk, the stakes were even higher because of the media environment in which this played out. Television soundbites and podcast monologues are consumed not as part of detailed debates, but as quick, emotionally charged content that reinforces audience bias. In that space, the truth can often be a distant second to the narrative. Crockett's move to bring the matter into court threatened to interrupt that pattern by demanding factual scrutiny. Asterisk. There were also concerns about the precedent the case might set. If Crockett succeeded in holding Patel accountable for defamation, it could open the door for other public officials to take legal action against those who spread deliberate misinformation about them. This could lead to more cautious speech, as some feared, more legal posturing, and fewer open exchanges. Either way, it marked a shift in how political actors engage with one another, especially in media-saturated environments. Asterisk, but beyond all the legal theory and media speculation, there was the human reality of the case. For Crockett, it meant enduring waves of online harassment, racist attacks, and threats to her safety, all of which escalated after Patel's comments aired. Her team tracked the spike in abuse and tied it directly to the interview. What started as a televised opinion became real-world harm. Asterisk, Patel continued to frame himself as a target of political retribution, asserting in follow-up interviews that the lawsuit was meant to silence dissent. But legal experts continued to push back, noting that the courtroom was not about censorship, was about responsibility. If you make a claim that harms someone's life, career, and public standing, you must be prepared to back it with truth. And if you can't, the law may step in where politics and media have failed. As the legal battle between Jasmine Crockett and Kash Patel continues to unfold, it has become clear that this is more than just a personal dispute. It is a test case for how political speech and accountability intersect in the modern media environment. Both sides have taken strong positions. Crockett is standing on the principle that public figures cannot recklessly spread falsehoods under the guise of political commentary without facing consequences. Patel, meanwhile, has positioned himself as a defender of free speech, claiming that his words were protected expressions of political concern, not malicious lies. Asterisk, the outcome of this case may very well shape how future defamation lawsuits are viewed when they involve elected officials and political commentators. Historically, courts have been reluctant to intervene in matters that could be interpreted as political speech, especially given the robust protections offered by the First Amendment. But Crockett's legal team has framed this case in a way that challenges that assumption, arguing that Patel's actions went beyond opinion and into deliberate fabrication with harmful intent. What's at stake isn't just Crockett's reputation or Patel's defense strategies, the question of where the line is drawn in an age when information spreads faster than fact-checking can keep up. If claims made on TV or social media, no matter how false, can be dismissed as just politics, then public trust in elected officials and democratic institutions will continue to erode. If, on the other hand, courts begin to impose clearer boundaries around truth and accountability, a new legal and ethical standard could take shape in political discourse. Beyond the legal realm, this case has already had a chilling and clarifying effect. Politicians, media figures, and influencers are paying attention. For those who rely on shock value and conspiracy to drive engagement, the possibility of serious legal consequences might lead to a recalibration of their methods. And for those targeted by false accusations, Crockett's lawsuit serves as a rare and forceful pushback against a culture of impunity that has grown in recent years. Yet the real story here is not about personalities, but about personalities, but about precedent. A case like this doesn't just end in a judgment or settlement, it sends a message. If Crockett prevails, it could mark a shift toward greater responsibility in political commentary. If Patel wins, or the case is dismissed, it could reinforce the idea that public figures are largely defenseless against coordinated misinformation campaigns, in either outcome. This case is a reminder that in the battle between speech and truth, the stakes are never just legal. They are social, institutional, and deeply personal. As the court proceedings advance, the country watches not just for a verdict, but for a sign of what the future holds for political accountability in a time of deep division and digital distortion.